Hi, I'm Richard Dennis, author of Fiume Restoral. While I work on the sequel to that novel, available sometime by the end of the year, I'd like to share with you another of the forgotten notables of the early 20th century. Sibilla Aleramo was a novelist, poet, and journalist. Her novel, UNA DONNA, A Woman, was a groundbreaking international sensation, depicting a woman's growth and self-discovery after being forced as a teenager to marry the man who raped her. The novel, considered scandalous when it was first published, closely followed the facts of her life. She's often considered a forerunner of Elena Ferrante with respect to feminist autobiographical fiction. Sibilla was born Marta Felicina Faccioin in 1876 in Italy's Piedmont region. She grew up in Milan until she was 11, when her father moved the family to a provincial village on the Adriatic coast, where he managed a glass factory. Since there was no school there for her to attend, she went to work in the factory as a bookkeeper. One of her father's employees, a man 10 years older than Sibilla, raped her. She was 15 years old. She did not reveal the rape to her family. She married the employee and had a child with him when she was 17. As a married woman, Sibilla began writing newspaper and journal articles about feminist issues, often focused on the oppressive stereotypes and cultural prejudices that burdened women in Italy. In 1902, after years of suffering domestic abuse, she moved to Rome, leaving her young son and her husband behind. She had a succession of love affairs with poets, including Giovanni Cena, who encouraged her to adopt the pen name Sibilla Aleramo and write about what had happened to her. The result was A Woman. The novel was the first and most successful of many attempts to explain and justify leaving her young son behind. It attracted favorable attention from prominent literary figures, including Gabriele D'Annunzio. From 1906 to 1910, Sibilla immersed herself in volunteer work to aid the illiterate peasants working in wretched conditions and squalor in the agricultural regions on the outskirts of Rome. She wrote and lectured to publicize the horror she had found. She established schools, taught in them, and solicited volunteers and funds to keep them going. Now, in 1910, she began a new phase of her life, turning away from her philanthropic work. She criticized contemporary Italian feminism, saying it was useless for women to compete on the basis of rationality with men. Instead, the way for women to catch up in the world of thought and art was for them to rely on their uniquely feminine intuition, leaving rationality to men. In 1911, she moved to Florence and mingled with modernists like Giovanni Papini and futurists, including Umberto Boccioni. She had brief affairs with both men, but declined to join their circles. She continued to write, but now her works were focused inward rather than on social or political issues. None of her subsequent, more self-absorbed works ever achieved the critical or popular acclaim that greeted A Woman. Throughout her life, she suffered from guilt and anguish over her decision to leave her son behind when she moved to Rome. She made numerous unsuccessful attempts to gain custody or visitation rights. Her son was almost 40 years old when she finally saw him again. Their reunion provided no relief from the bad feelings she had over her loss. In the early years of fascism, she signed Benedetto Croce's Manifesto of the Anti-Fascist Intellectuals. But by 1933, she embraced fascism. She appealed to Mussolini for financial support. Through the intervention of Queen Elena, she was granted a small yearly government pension, which continued until Mussolini's fall in 1943. During this time, she wrote articles praising Mussolini for stressing the primary role of motherhood for women and admiring the squadristi, the men whose violent, lawless attacks ruthlessly enforced the fascist rule. After the war, she renounced fascism and apologized for her support. She later joined the Italian Communist Party, for which she wrote and lectured until her death at the age of 83. If you'd like to learn more about Sibilla Aleramo, I suggest reading her autobiographical novel, A Woman, letting her speak for herself about the traumatic events that shaped her life. My copy had a long and enlightening introduction written by Richard Drake, which filled in details about her life before and after publication of her greatest novel. I hope you've enjoyed this brief look at one of the fascinating people who influenced the 20th century through their words and actions. Join me again in a couple of weeks for another of the prominent men and women who deserve to be remembered. And please check out my novel, Fiume Restoral, on sale on Amazon and other fine retail sites.